I want to go through a little, highlight some of the policies that are being used here because what I see happening is really quite disturbing, certainly on the Canadian context, where you have, in particular, a federal government that is on a warpath to shut down the oil and gas industry. And I guess the rationale for that is to achieve what is it called? The so-called net zero policies. Is that it, Michelle?
Mhm. Yes, the whole idea of getting to net zero is that we don't emit anything more than what nature can absorb. And so the federal government suggests that, tree planting would be a good thing. Carbon offsets, buying and selling of carbon uh, credits is suggested as one method, but of course that doesn't actually get rid of any of the carbon dioxide. Lots of other methods like direct air capture, where pretty much like a big vacuum cleaner in the sky sucking carbon dioxide out of the air, or carbon capture, utilization, and storage. But these are not ready at market scale, and they're not they won't address the large amount of emissions that humans have, and they're not necessary. But all of these measures to shut down industry are really to meet this rather abstract numerical goal that some bean counters have come up with, because
Hmm.
they looked at the emissions and said, okay, if we just cut oil and gas, then we'll be fine. Well, we won't be, because nobody will be able to do anything. We
Hmm.
need energy.
We do
That's what
need
drives our
energy.
modern life.
Yeah. Well, certainly, especially in countries like Canada where it's relatively cold. I mean, this is a life and death issue, isn't it? Um,
Yes.
I
And
think.
it's not a simple matter of electrification. This is sold to citizens as, well, this is the solution. If we put in electrification, then that solves the problem. Well, where does that electrical energy come from? It's a secondary source. It comes from a gas plant, a coal plant, a hydro plant, a nuclear facility. All those things are made or powered by fossil fuels. You can't have electricity without them. So,
Exactly.
it's not well thought out.
So the carbon tax then is another example of policies that have really been used in a very widespread way. It's gone cascaded right like a domino right through the economy and has really created a lot of inflation and misery in people's lives as they go to the grocery store. Anybody can see that or go to the pump. But does the carbon tax make any difference in the likelihood that somehow global warming will be mitigated?
No, it doesn't. Because, first of all, fuel costs are what's called inelastic.
Hmm.
People can't do without them. The whole idea of a carbon tax is really very basically a Pigouvian tax, which is sort of a sin tax.
Hmm.
So the idea is, if you tax cigarettes more, you'll smoke less because they become too expensive.
Hmm.
And that's true. But it doesn't work for fuel, because you have to drive to work. And we have a study called The 11 Million Ton Obsession by Robert Lyman. And he shows that over 5 decades, the federal government was trying to get people out of their cars and taking public transit. And after hammering people for 5 decades, the number of people in private cars went from about 81% down to about 79. So almost negligible, because people need to get around, especially in Canada where it's very cold and distances are long. The real crunch of the climate policies are the hidden costs that people don't see. So it's more than just axe the tax. There's what are climate policies costing us? Robert Lyman found that we're spending about $476 billion, or 11,900 per resident of Canada. And over the next decade, that would be $28,000 per household.
Sorry,
Or contracts for different,
$28,000 a household.
yes, or contracts for difference. These are where there are programs being set up where we, the taxpayers, will be guaranteeing a certain level of income to various energy companies, usually renewable companies, um, at a rate that works out to about $1,000 a ton carbon tax. And then there's another one, reaching net zero. The estimated cost would be anywhere between 2 trillion to 5.2 trillion. So Robert Lyman suggests that averaged over 27 years, 2 trillion would cost every one of today's residents about $1,850 per year, averaged over 27 years, on 5.2 trillion would cost every one of today's residents $4,815 a year. These things are happening now. This money is being drained from your
Wow.
pocket now. But this is hidden. You know what? The carbon tax, at least you see it on your receipt at the store or on your
Hmm.
gas bill.
Hmm. So,
But this is hidden and draining your pocket right now.
well, I think those are pretty stunning figures. So this is really hitting people's lives. There's no mystery as to why people are finding it hard to cope in their lives with costs. This is all
Mhm.
happening in a way that is not very transparent. You use the word stealth, and this is bad public policy. It should be transparent so we can have accountability and know what's going on.
And the other thing, what are the benefits of those things I just mentioned? Like some people might say, you know what, I'm willing to pay that if it saves the lives of my children. But he did another report on cost benefit and found that even if all these policies were instituted and met, by 2100, we would have reduced global warming by 7 thousandths of a degree Celsius.
Yeah, so this is absurd. So these people are designing policies that essentially have their hands in our pockets and we don't even know it.
Yeah,
This is
that's
wrong.
right.
So when we look at this, I mean, I think another angle here is the whole area of building codes on houses. I mean, the building codes are radically different than they were just even 25 years ago. And that puts a tremendous increased cost on every house, doesn't it, Michelle?
Yes, Robert Lyman did another report for us called Forget the Dream House. And he said that the net zero building codes probably add about $100,000 to a house.
Yeah. So you wonder, why is the middle class being destroyed? Well, gosh, they've got us coming and going when it comes to all these regulations. It's not just carbon taxes, it's changes in building codes. This is really adding up, all because someone believes they are morally and ethically justified to create their sense of utopia based really on arguably what is not based on the science. Am I being too harsh about this?
No, I think that you're quite correct. And I suggest that people also look at one other avenue that I've only recently become aware of. But um, the whole baby boomer generation is fading away. And when you talk about net zero 2030 and net zero 2050, these numbers actually happen to coincidentally coincide with net zero 2030 is when all the youngest of the boomers enter retirement, and net zero 2050 is when all the boomers will be gone. So there's a tremendous transfer of money going on in that time period. So boomers will be stopping their contributions to RRSPs, and they will be withdrawing funds from their pensions and from other resources that they have. Their children normally would be inheriting millions of dollars in property and goods. But if their parents are now being decimated by this net zero climate policy, um, you know, squirrel hamster wheel that we're running on, they will be inheriting nothing and actually they'll own nothing.
Wow.
So, there seems to be some other financial elements in the background related to pension funds that we're not aware of. And in fact, the OECD nations in 2016 were said to have $78 trillion in pension fund liabilities.
Wow. Okay, so this is very interesting information that a lot of people would be surprised to hear about. I think the other side to this is it's pretty important, Michelle, to have a heart to heart with your banker, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's hard for them to fight back because they're under the umbrella of the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutes. And they, as it turns out, are quite a climate activist organization. And in conjunction with that, Senator Rosa Galvez has a bill before the House, which is, I think it's Bill S-243. And this is related to climate finance, aligning climate finance. And some people have looked at the bill and said, you know what, maybe this even means down the line that a bank could say, oh, you want a mortgage for your house and you don't have a heat pump, you have a gas boiler.
All right. So there's a lot of power being exercised here, and a lot of it is being done behind the scenes. So the call for transparency and accountability is very important. And of course, much of this power is being exercised by people that frankly we don't know or are not elected. So the question
That's right.
I have as we wrap up our discussion, it's been quite a far-reaching discussion, Michelle, is what can citizens do? Because if we look at this, it begs the question, are they governing for us or themselves?
Well, it's hard to know what to do because the octopus is pretty big, but I guess the first thing is to be informed about it. And the second thing is to push back, to question, to demand transparency. I think at the municipal level, there's been some excellent work by people like Tom Harris of the International Climate Science Coalition. And he's put together some techniques for actually putting your counselor on the spot and demanding facts or that they roll back some of these policies. And
Right on.
uh, it's cities have the highest concentration of population in the world. That's why they went after the cities. But cities actually have no mandate to do anything with climate change. Their mandate is supposed to serve the citizens with basic necessary services like sewage, water, gas,
Hmm.
public services, EMS, police,
Hmm.
fire, etc., and tree planting, right?
Hmm.
But they're not supposed to be selling carbon credits on the trees on your property, and some cities are doing that.
Right on. Well, Michelle, I want to thank you for this incredible discussion where we've certainly learned more about the science, but also how power is being exercised and really not necessarily for our interests and what we can do about it. So thank you so much for your leadership and with the Friends of Science and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.